Hi everyone, welcome to Wool and Spinning. This is a teaching episode that is brought to you by the Patreon subscribers who support the show. I hope that you are all doing really well. As you can see, I'm spinning in front of the fire tonight. It is almost Christmas here, and I am really enjoying doing some sampling with this lovely roving that I have from my stash. We have been slowly working our way through all of the different spinning drafts, and we've sort of come now to the time of having to look at long draw. So this is some roving that is from my stash. You'll notice that it's roving because it's very, there's no parallel, the fibers aren't parallel, they're all jumbled up in a big mess. There's no rhyme or reason to how the fibers are carded. They wouldn't have been combed after carding, they were just carded. And I think this was actually prepped locally. This is a local fleece from a local supplier that is a farmer and a friend of mine. So one of the things that I do when I'm going to start sampling for long draw is I actually divide the fiber in half like this. I often will divide my rovings in half, and sometimes I will even split them again. Because I'm only just starting to sample with this fiber, I'm not going to split it again just yet. I'm going to wait and see what I think of this, and then I'll go from there in terms of looking at what I want to do with the fiber and whether I want to split it again into another quarter. So when I'm starting long draw and when I know that I'm going to be sampling using long draw, I tend to pre-draft the fibers just ever so slightly. This does pull it slightly back into alignment, but not completely. Obviously, when the fibers are all jumbled up and aren't parallel anymore, it's very difficult to get them to become parallel again unless you actually hand comb them. So I just like to add a little bit even more air into my roving by just drafting it out just ever so slightly, not a lot, but just a little bit. And then I kind of fluff up the end and get it ready to put on my wheel. When I go to set up my wheel, I'm spinning on my Lendrum tonight. When I set up my wheel, I like to have my uptake be quite high. I want my fiber to draw onto my wheel quite quickly. And I'm not on a very low ratio. I'm actually on a higher than usual ratio. I'm on 12:1. I often will spin worsted on 8:1 or 9:1, but when it comes to long draw, I tend to increase my uptake, and I will probably actually end up spinning this on 15:1. The only reason why I say that is because I know myself and I know what I tend to like when it comes to long draw, and I like to have that twist into my fiber quite quickly, and I can spin long draw very quickly as a result. I join the way that I normally join, which is with a looped leader. I use very long leaders. This was a tip that I got from watching some of Beth Smith's videos on her website. And I tend to just loop some of the fiber through that loop on the end and let the twist go into the fiber. From there, the way that I like to teach long draw to people is actually to start with short backward draw. Don't make it any more complicated than that. Just get yourself into the rhythm of spinning short backward. That's it. Just spin some short backward for just a couple of seconds and get yourself used to the motion. And then from there, you can see already that the single isn't necessarily as consistent as I would necessarily want for a worsted single. But this is roving. It's not parallel. It's all jumbled up. You're going to get some inconsistencies. So right off the bat, let that go. Let your want and need for really consistent even singles to go for this exercise. So I go from short backward draft like this to starting to put, instead of moving this hand back like we did for short backward draft, I tend to draft back, and instead of shifting that hand back, I'm actually just going to let go. And I'm going to add a little bit more twist. I'm going to unpinch, repinch, and pull back. I'm going to unpinch. I'm going to put some more twist in, unpinch, draft backward, put some more twist in, maybe 1 or 2 treadles, unpinch and let that twist run up, repinch, and pull backward. Now I've got a pretty long length of fiber here now. My hand is out of the shot already. So I'm actually going to let this run on. I'm going to repinch and let that twist build up again, 1 or 2 treadles. I'm going to unpinch, let that twist run up into my fiber supply and draft back. I'm going to unpinch and draft back. Let that twist build up, unpinch, and draft back. Now I know this isn't twist locked, so I'm just going to add a little bit of twist, and I'm going to let this run onto my wheel. And then I'm back to the beginning. Let that twist build up, pinch, unpinch, let that twist run up, and draft back. Repinch, let that twist build up, unpinch, repinch, and pull back. Now, how do you know when it's time to let it onto the wheel? When it's twist locked. So I tend to add a little bit more twist and then I let it run onto the wheel. The reason for that is when I first started learning how to spin long draw, I tended not to allow enough twist into my singles, and then when I would go to ply, my singles would fall apart. So as I'm running it on, I tend to let a little bit more twist into those singles to really get those fibers twist locked, and then I let it run up onto the wheel. Now, one of the things about spinning long draw that I think a lot of people really struggle with when they're first learning is keeping it consistent. So one of the things that I always say is if you're finding that your singles are really inconsistent and they're going really thick and thin, just go back for a couple of minutes to short backward draw. And you will notice immediately that your singles go thick and thin when you draw back a longer distance. So you break the staple and go too long or too short. So if you want to get your singles thicker and you find that they're getting really, really super thin and you're getting that real lace weight, let the twist build up a bit more so that you capture more fibers. And then when you repinch and draft back, don't go back quite as far. And you can see how immediately your singles get quite a bit thicker. Now that's not what I'm looking for, so I'm actually going to let that twist out of there by just untwisting my singles a bit and teasing those fibers apart and getting them to draft apart a little bit more to even them out. And you can see how very quickly I was able to get it untwist locked by just redistributing that twist down my singles. I think many people when they're first learning to spin actually spin this way and then are told that it's not the best way to get consistent yarn from comb top, and they stop spinning this way, and then they sort of forget how to spin like this. But I find the key to keep your long draw consistent is to really keep your feet slow and make sure that as you draw back, you're drawing back the same distance every time. And as long as your singles don't get too ropey and too overspun, which means you need to keep your feet really slow. And if you're finding that even with keeping your feet slow, that twist is building up too much, go to a bigger ratio, go to a bigger whirl. Maybe not one of these small guys. You want to go to the big pulley, and maybe that will help to keep that twist, keep your singles from becoming ropey. I know some people teach long draw by actually telling people to put their other hand behind their back and drawing back like this. I personally don't like that method because I find you have nothing to draw back against, and your singles tend to get quite thick and quite inconsistent. And I think many of us prefer singles that are quite consistent because we're often spinning for knitting. Like this roving, for example, is eventually going to be a sweater for myself. So I want my yarn to be quite consistent. I only draw back when my fingers are pinching. So if my fingers are open, it's because I'm allowing the twist to run up into my fiber supply. Then I pinch and draw back. Pinch and draw back. And I let that twist run up when my fingers are unpinched. And I only draw back when my fingers are actually pinching my singles, giving me something, some sort of a resistance to pull back against. Now you may be wondering how to join. When it comes to long draw, I tend to spin right to the end of my fiber supply. I don't tend to leave a bunch of fuzzy bits to join onto. And I'll show you how I tend to join. I spin right to the end of my fiber supply and I take this fuzzy stuff and I sort of sweep it across the bottom and I let that twist pick it up, but then I pinch right at that join to let that twist build up. And I use that as my place of pinching and drawing from for a little while to get that really pinched together and really compacted together. And then I carry on. So I'll show you that again. So I spin right to the end. I take my fuzzy bits, I wave them along the end, pinch, draw back, unpinch, let that twist run up, pinch, draw back. Like I just mentioned, I don't particularly like unsupported long draw. It's not my favorite thing. I know you can get really great fast results from it. For me personally, I get better, more consistent results when I pinch and pull back on my fingers. And you'll have to play with it and see what you find works for you. Now you can get quite technical and draw back on every treadle of your one foot if you're spinning on a double drive wheel, or every treadle for a single drive, and only pull back so that you're getting the exact same amount of twist into every inch of yarn for the entire length. I have been spinning, I really love long draw. It's one of my absolute most favorite ways of spinning. And I am only just now starting to spin that way. So while you're learning, as long as your fibers are twist locked, don't worry about that. I'm going to pause. I'm going to finish this little bit off and then we're going to Andy and Ply and we're going to chat about that. So just one moment. Okay, so I finished my my singles and I have my bracelet here ready to go. This is bracelet plying. Some people call it Andy and Plying. If you are not sure about this type of plying, head over to YouTube. You're on YouTube now, but when you're finished watching this, do a search for bracelet plying or Andy and Plying. This method will come up. There's lots of how-to videos online, and there's some picture tutorials. There's a good rundown in the book Yarnitecture by Jillian Moreno. There's lots of places to learn how to do this. Everybody does it a little bit differently. I tend to wrap around my middle finger and around the back of my hand, and then around my middle finger and around the back of my hand. And it's a great way to do sample spinning. So we have just finished spinning our long draw singles, and I am sampling for a sweater. So I am going to now ply. And the beauty of woolen spinning, when you are spinning worsted, your singles have to be as perfect as possible, because when you come to your plying, there really isn't any other opportunity to fix your singles because you've already squished all of the air out of your singles and your worsted yarns. So when you go to ply, your worsted yarns need to be pretty perfect. I have a worsted yarn here. So this yarn was spun worsted and it had to be pretty perfect because all of the air was already squished out of it when I plied it. So plying it was really just smoothing it down and making sure that the angle of my two singles came together in a nice, pleasing way that I liked. Woolen yarns are different because you spin them and your bobbin looks kind of like a dog's breakfast when you finish spinning. The fixing of the yarn comes in the plying. So as you are running your fingers down, you're feeling for any inconsistencies, any nubbins or nups, any areas of yarn that are particularly inconsistent that you want to squish down and fix. And I find this is also the time when, if there's any really areas of weakness, obviously it's going to come apart, but it's also an opportunity to inspect your yarn and sort of see if this was a 3-ply, would some of this lumpy and bumpiness be hidden by the 3-plies coming together, and because it's a 2-ply, some of that lumpy bumpiness is overly exaggerated, and maybe it would be better as a 3-ply. Now here's an area that's particularly, there's a slub in here of extra fiber. So in order to fix it, I can actually just squish it down with my fingers. And now it's very consistent in diameter to the rest of the yarn. You're gonna hear Charlotte in the background. She's wandering around. Oh, she just slumped down. Now I tend to put a lot of ply twist into my woolen yarns. I tend to like quite high twist angles for sweater yarns anyways, because I want my yarns to be durable. But I'm actually gonna play with this and put a slightly lesser ply twist angle and see after I wash it what I think. So I'm actually gonna let it go onto the wheel a little bit sooner than I normally would, with a slightly lesser twist angle. And after I wash it and thwack it, I'll see what I think. Now, with woolen yarns, for me personally, I like to give them a really good soak. And then I like to give them a really, really good bash and thwack afterwards. To even out that ply twist and to get those yarns to really bloom if they're gonna bloom, and to really become a bit rounder. I like them to be a teeny tiny bit fuzzy, so I tend to thwack them pretty good. And I try not to squish absolutely all of the air out, because of course with woolen yarns, one of the beauties about them is all of the air. So I want to preserve as much of that as I possibly can. One of the things about woolen yarns that I often notice is that the when I am spinning them and when I take it off to skein it, there's areas that are a little bit more inconsistent than others and a little bit thicker. And I find when I go to knit with them, they often end up very even and very consistent. So try not to worry too much about your initial yarns when you're first learning how to spin long draw. I bet you when you knit your initial swatches that they'll be perfectly fine and they'll look like really consistent yarns. So don't be too critical. Keep practicing. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. I'm Welford Pearls pretty much everywhere. And you can also contact me, Rachel, at welfordpearls.com. And if you're a Patreon subscriber, you can always message me through Patreon. Thank you to our Patreon subscribers for supporting the work here and for enabling these teaching content videos. I will see you in the new year. Merry Christmas, everyone. Bye.
As we wait for Santa, Silent Night banana. Yeah, it's Christmas time.